Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Growth Model Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Bob McGinnis. As usual, I'm Robert Klein. Today, we're talking about a great tool, originally called the Open the Flow key. Now we're calling it the Team Overlay key. And this is a tool that was really great for getting to the heart of what motivates each person around the table. It's a really good meeting prep tool. One of the great things about it is that once we talk about finding team strengths and doing things like Colby and DISC, and just having a great kind of quantified way of addressing and defining each person's personality. Well, you can use that information with a tool like this to create an appropriate framework for discussing personal motivators. Now, this is the thing people sometimes feel is off limits, but if you have a good framework like this, you can get to the heart of the matter, what's really motivating people. So, Bob, why don't you tell us about this?
Yeah, it was fun for me to do this. I know we just pulled this out this morning and just discussed it, and then we came to the conclusion. I think it'd be a very good thing to share, not just as a tool that could be used, but even I think some of the stories that we just pulled out, Robert, behind this tool really got me thinking, and I think it's something that's really worthwhile sharing.
Yeah.
And Robert, your insight as far as how you can use this as a facilitator for a meeting. And saying that, I mean, I started this mind map, and I'm going back again when I did this, because this one's probably about 5 years ago, maybe more. And I was really interested at that point in my dental partnership, which is what this represents, this mind map. And I blocked the names out to protect people and the confidentiality, but I will share that this was a tool we used, and it was something that it was a management meeting tool, because it's the people are in here, not just the owners, but also associates are in here, and two of the managers, administrators we call them. So I sat down. I thought, I really want to get a better, more clear way of running these meetings. In those days, I'm the one who's running the meeting, so it's kind of everything spun off of me. I was kind of the de facto strategic partner. So I started to think I got to find a way to really open the key to, really enhance the flow in these meetings and where we wanted to get. And I really started this thing to say it was really about me leading the dynamic. So some of the things that I put on here were not really what I shared with the team, but as I really worked through that one meeting with this tool, I realized this is a tool we should be doing together and sharing together. So I started with this, and I'll just run my cursor. In the middle, I always usually put something that allows me to focus on something. I talked about unique ability in this, effortless, seamless, and I wanted to have some insight into unique ability here to really drive this forward. So when I did the tool, I started with me over here, and I can share this as me down here. Now, a key to when you're dealing with any of these type of tools that deal with abilities, unique abilities, is there has to be something in it which actually has some foundation of what makes that person up. What are the keys of that person? And so I really like, and I'll reference back to our growth platform when we talk about strength section in the team block, is that I really have to know everybody's Colby number one, and that's what these numbers are at the bottom. Colby's to me are how you initiate your action. So knowing that, and on this particular one, I use the DISC, which is the two numbers up top, which is DISC is DISC, and that's just something which really gauges what your personality real type is. And DISC meaning D is the driver, the I is the influential component the person has, the S, which is the steady, and the C is the conscientious. So knowing what people are, simplistic, I can know if somebody is a high D, high I. In my case, that's me. I tend to be very much a driver. I tend to really trying to use my driving nature for influence in any situation I'm in. And, contrasting that with somebody who would be an SC down here, well, this person tends to be more steady, more conscientious, and they tend to be a little quieter, the person tends to listen a little bit more, and they tend to also be a little more conflict averse. So you can see how the conflict right away occurs between an interface between a high D, high I, and an SC. And then when you fold that into how somebody initiates their action down here, which in me, I really love to get new ideas on the table. I want to get them out. I want to get them forward. Where somebody, if they're tend to be a little bit more on the SC end of things, and also with a little bit of resistance to change in terms of new ideas, you really have to know how to manage that interface. So how I laid this tool out, first of all, is I just sit down and I put all the players on the table, the people, the players, the people that are in the sphere of this meeting. And these are, so by identifying that, and I think another thing is a very, very valuable thing is kind of knowing some of the background of the person, some of the history of the person that you're with at the table, what's happened in the past. Some of the instances will give you kind of an insight into them, not just how they operate in the business, but knowing, almost as important, how they are in their personal life. So that to me allows me then, as I'm dealing with this thing and I'm going forward to this, I give myself a little note down here. I really want to be able to share the positive aspects of each individual. And then what it allows me to do is I can then frame these negatives, not as a negative or a weakness, but just as a sticking point to allow us to continue to always spin back to the positive with an individual. So if I was to take an example of a person here, and I think I'll use this one down here because I have a great story with this one. This particular individual is a partner, and I'll say that because this is a great story, and this goes way, way back, and I didn't have a tool in those days. Now, just understanding that this person tends to be, he's a very strong fact finder. If you look at the number down here, which means he's that type of person, which is a very common Colby index in how he initiates his thinking and his action. He really needs to get his research done, his ducks in a row, really due diligence. He's a great dentist for that. I mean, he's the go-to guy in our team. When you really want to know, what's happening with current materials, anything out there, he really loves that stuff. Continuing education, he's right up on all of this stuff. It's a big, big key to him, in the business world. So, he needs to be recognized for this. He needs to be recognized for his knowledge. He needs to be appreciated for his knowledge. So he's the kind of guy, though, when you deal with, he is somebody, though, that, he's got some ego in his past. He really has a desire to be liked and appreciated in his personal life as well. He's just a really likable, affable guy. He always seems happy, never seems to be worried. He kind of moves a little bit slow. From a productive standpoint, he could be better, but, patients love him. He's a great guy to go to when things seem to be like, you're under some stress and you see this guy and you just feel kind of more calm. I mean, he just seems happy. Everything's going to be okay, which has really been helpful for us in some of the turmoil we've been through in the office. So a good story to tell with this, and why this tool would have really would have been such a valuable thing if I had this tool back in then. I'm going to dial this back maybe almost 20 years ago when this individual was an associate. I mean, he came into the practice, and I believe it was his first place he worked. And he came in, and always in my situation, I'm looking to bring these people in to embrace them as a future owner in the company, in the dental practice, and he was great. I mean, there was no red lights with this individual. It was great, doc. So we're at the 5-6 year period, I believe, and we had worked out an amazing buy-in for him to be part of this in our cost share model, and everything was done. So this was a very interesting thing that happened because, it was, we were actually, everything was agreed to. There was no conflict with the price, the terms, everything we were doing. It was a done deal. And I found out, haphazardly, I mean, not that he was, we were supposed to have everything signed, and it was delayed a couple weeks for no real reason. There was no urgency. And I found out he was actually negotiating to buy another practice in town. And finding that out, with my personality and where I am and how I deal with things, just about put me on the floor. But it doesn't take me long in a situation like that to get up off the floor, and I was enraged. So that meeting was interesting because I just brought this individual in and I asked him point blank, without conflict, I asked him clearly, are you negotiating to buy so-and-so's practice? And he said yes. He just looked me right in the eye and he said yes. And I just lost it. Robert, I just, when I say I lost it, I mean, there's no physical altercation, but, it was 2 guys together. It was 3 guys in the room at that point because I did have a partner as well before this. And I just let fly with the most profane exchange. And there was no exchange. It was all one-sided. And I basically told him to get out. And he did, and he left. And he, it was just like, how could somebody that I trusted and supported so much, just like I would almost if he was my own son, bring him in, and to have that happen to me. I mean, I could not understand it because I could not see that in his personality. I thought, how could I have been so fooled by his personality? And it just really floored me. And, so I hired another associate, had a great guy in. I didn't hear from this individual. He went on, and I got a call probably 6 to 8 weeks later. And it was this individual. And he said, I want to meet with you. And I said, you want to meet with me? He said, no, I really want to meet with you. And I said, okay. I hadn't spoken to him since that day. I felt a little bad about it. I mean, I was pretty tough on him.
Yeah.
And he took it, and he just walked out, and he didn't exchange back and forth with I mean, normally if you say something to a guy, you can imagine what I said, and they'll say something back, and the situation never gets addressed. You just get this awful exchange, but he didn't do any of that.
Right.
And if you think about his personality type. So when this story may be getting a little long, Robert, but I guess to shorten the story, I think he basically asked to come back.
Right.
And I said, why would you even ask that? And he looked at me and he said, well, I want to tell you, I just couldn't do it at the end. I could not sign it. And I talked it over with my wife, and he said, I can't see spending the rest of my life and my career in a place where I don't think that you consider me a friend.
So it came down to personal. It came down to this very personal thing that actually you could almost predict just from his disc, and you could see that would be a factor.
And as I say it, I almost get a little emotional because
Right.
you go back, and I remember looking at him, and I thought, I couldn't say anything. I mean, I just never had that happen to me in my life that somebody had done that.
Right.
And it was like, I said, I said, what you're asking me is, we have another guy who's committed here now for the last 2 months. He's working out great. You have staff here. This is a very difficult thing for me to answer for you right now. And I said, I got to get back to you. But, as I caught my breath and I thought about it, and then I went right back to what our dental practice, McLeod Dental Care in those days, meant. What is this about? It was always about how does he fit now with patients? What do patients think of him? Great. Yeah. What is his dentistry like? Fantastic. What does he bring to the team? Amazing, unique ability. Right. I mean, there were no negatives at all in terms of why would Frank be in the practice in the future? Well, he was in. Keep in mind, he was signing. It was right. A 5 to 6 year journey, and that didn't change. Yeah. So I had to really peel out of this incident, and I had to look at it, and I had to say, is that real? Could somebody really look me in the eye and tell me the truth and really say that?
Right.
And it's so different than me. And I had to say, yes. I mean, he is telling the truth.
Yeah.
Boy, I tell you, Robert, for me to go through that at that period of time, keep in mind, I went through a terrible situation my first 2 years where my associateship broke up, and I had nowhere to go in 4 weeks, and I set my own practice up. So I'd had a lot of conflict already with a principal dentist in 1979, and I left in 81, and that's a different story. Right. But to have this happen with no conflict in my eyes, here I'm a high D, high I, and he didn't have the ability to ever come to me and say, well, we don't ever even go and have a drink together.
Right.
And I thought, well, we talked about that. He said, well, I know. I said, well, we don't want it to interfere with our business. He said, but I know it's not just business to me.
Right.
Wow.
And that's what this is about, too. This is about having to really, it's hard to bring personal stuff into business. We don't have a framework for it culturally. So you actually have to kind of create it through the culture at work. You actually have to come up with tools like this. You have to put a framework up so it feels like it's constructive. So it feels like it's part of, a business mindset to say, hey, I have these personal motivators here. Luckily we have a place in the process for that stuff to come up.
Yeah, and for me particularly, I mean, it really allowed me to grow as a person, to step outside my own very dominant personality,
right.
To look at others. From that day forward, I was always very keyed into people's personal lives,
sure.
What they do, what's important. This guy I'm talking about, he's still with us today. He's great. I mean, right. We just went through, as many of you know, a terrible practice breakup, and we're just finished two-year arbitration. This guy's front and center on our team.
Yeah.
He's great. I mean, he's quirky. He's quirky, but he's great. I mean, he's like a big teddy bear, this guy. I mean, he's a wonderful partner to have. I mean, But understanding it, if he was running the practice, oh my goodness, chaos. Oh, I mean, you talk to my managers who are up here, and they say, "Oh, you just gotta appreciate Frank for what he brings to the table, but you want to ignore him." It's, and you know what the funny thing is? Frank knows all this. You
Right.
need to appreciate him, but then he almost wants you to ignore him at times, but tell him when we brought something to the table that works, because he knows he doesn't have an ability to pull the trigger with good decisions on his own. So he in turn
Right.
appreciates people that can pull the trigger, lead the dynamic, make a good decision with an administrator up there. He never ever stands in the way, but he never ever hesitates to put his take in. And that's what an owner should do. And
Right.
that's also when we look at our ownership model in the growth platform and how we manage this thing with the training, owners should always be able to actually give their input. And if they can give it in an environment where people recognize them with the key to what makes them work, the
Right.
actual key, the key to every one of these people. Look at this one here. This key to this individual, he's a partner, solid. He's like a Boy Scout. But with this guy here, it's all about trustworthiness. He's amazing, totally conflict averse, never says anything at the owner's table seemingly, but always goes with the flow. Amazing partner, but terrible to be owning a solo business. So a lot of conversation. This could be a 2-day workshop on this tool. But and when I even look at the two administrators, amazing people. But with one administrator, it was okay. But when we started to get into a larger staff, where there were many different personality types on the table,
Right.
when you look at this person here with his a high D, high I, and they were butting heads with it with an SC, or the SC was undermining the DI, it didn't work. But see here, we've got two different personality types in administration. And the minute we allowed an individual that could not deal, this is an administrator, and it's easy just to bowl over somebody and use a big club. But if you can find a better way to communicate and understanding, if you appreciate this, that high D, high I people, we're very dominant, very influential people, they can have knockdown dragouts together.
Yeah.
And that's how they make decisions, and that's how they come to a common ground. But if a very conscientious, quiet, steady kind of personality and SC, if they listen to an interface between a high DI and a high DI, they'll think they're going to kill each other. But
Right.
that's how progress occurs. Knowing that's critical. I mean, I can't not think about going into any situation now without knowing some of these strengths to allow us to communicate. We always come back to those words. If you know the strengths of the individual, you'll allow them to embrace their key touch points. If they're allowed also to understand that people will get it when they're in an area that they need help, when they can't do it. And if they feel free to even say, look, I'm great, that I feel so thankful that you're doing this and I'm not. It's really interesting to leading this whole dynamic. And as far as a management tool, I think it's such a key one. But understand, this is a little bit more next level management tool in a so-called, Robert, what did you call this? Like a suite of tools?
Oh yeah, just kind of a meeting running essentials or meeting running suite, because there's just a lot that goes into running meetings. I mean, if you look at this, one of the things that's fascinating about this is that when you're in a high trust situation, one of the things that you kind of need to do is have all this reality on the table. You need to be able to have this complex, nuanced, long description of someone where you go, you're good at this and this and this, but we all know that if we let you do this, if you had your druthers, this would be a 4-hour meeting. There's always somebody like that. And a ability to say this stuff in a nicely neutral way where everyone understands that everyone has their good side and their downside, and everyone understands how that works, and this is laid out and there's a framework for it. Because otherwise, if you were just to make that assertion, and this happens in meetings, it becomes kind of this very red flag language where you go, now you always do this. If you say that, you're actually escalating conflict. But if you have a tool like this and everyone went through the process of creating it together, all these things are on the table, they're understood, nobody's offended, everyone can just say, yeah, fair is fair, that's correct. And it's a good thing that we have already figured this out, so we don't have to figure it out in the process, in the heat of every single meeting. And now we have a way to talk about things, because that's the other thing about this tool, is that, like you say a lot of the time, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is that we have to figure out how to talk about it. Because a lot of the time, people will obstruct because there's personal stuff. And knowing what the list of personal stuff is, it's a much faster process where you go, oh, wait a minute, I know what this is. We haven't recognized your contribution, or we haven't recognized how difficult this transition is going to be for you. Something like that.
And if I was to look at this tool now, and you just keep me to some great stuff, if I was to say, how would I help somebody with a tool like this? I'd almost reverse engineer it.
Yeah.
So if you had like a blank form here and I think we will do that. We'll set this out in a worksheet, so to speak, because then you can also tap into some of the Colbys and discs, because then as you reverse engineer, you say, well, what would be the ideal that we're looking for in a team, even as you're building your team? And I was just thinking of that because if there are ways that Colby will tell you what's the ideal index to have in the personality types. Colby's more about what are the initiate action types. And a key to that is, I'm just looking at this one down here, and this is a really interesting one in a big group, where you need to have that person the key to this person is common sense.
Right.
And he's the go-to guy for common sense in a meeting, because he's got this profile that's across the board, what we call a mediator profile. He's very steady, conscientious in his disc. So this guy takes all things in a meeting. He doesn't say much, but he's able to bring both sides together, because with his Colby, he appreciates all sides of thinking. And he tends to be not so dominant, which is very good in terms of if you can give him a voice at the table, he tends to mediate. It's not a common type of index to have, but if you can find that on a team, it's just hugely valuable to bring all sides together.
Equanimity, yeah.
Equanimity, yeah. It's great. So, great tool. I think it's a great tool to be used as an individual, just using it, and then you could be free to make your own notes for yourself. And then use it as a group to share. I think it's just such an important thing. What comes out of a dynamic in a meeting where everybody feels appreciated personally and professionally, and they're not judged. Right. And where we really understand that coming out of these meetings, in the first 1 or 2 meetings that you share together with these things, your results will be, we'll use that word potentiation a lot, that we use that in scientific terms, but your results will be magnified, and you'll just feel great at the end of the day. You won't feel stepped on, you'll feel appreciated, you feel like you have a voice, and it's a great way to make progress with any situation.
Now, this is an amazing way to empower yourself to run a meeting, by empowering everybody to kind of have to acknowledge the strengths that they have, because those strengths are what empower them to deal with the situations that you're asking them to deal with.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit of a tip for the docs out there is that I even put the associates in this. I put the associates in this as well, because they're key people on a team. Yeah. If you look at the doctor's team and the manager, I like it if we can, especially in meetings, that we will take the whole clinical team in, the leaders and the clinical team as far as the doctors. I think it's important to look at some of these associates as really valuable sitting here, because I like to look and see where they're going to be in the future. I want them to feel like this is their practice. So the managers, the key people, the associates, and the doctors, the doctor owners at the table, boy, you really get really a varied viewpoint from everybody that gives you a better result.
Yeah.
Because that's where we all want to end at the end of the day. It's all about just moving forward and solving problems in the group. And you solve those problems first. If you can solve the problems within the group, then you can solve issues.
That's right. So that's why we spend so much time on team communication, team strengths, and this is all putting that stuff into action. So this is a great way to kind of concretely look at what the point of doing team strengths measurement is, and to look at really the nuts and bolts of how you implement a team communication structure. Not just that you will it into existence and say it's nice that we talk more, but that you actually are really careful and methodical about how do you set up your structure for communication with tools like this.
Sounds great.
All right. Well, this is a good conversation, and it'll be nice to share the worksheet when we have that up. And in the meantime, we'll be sharing a screencast of this too, so that'll be great. So it's nice talking to you, Bob, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to find out more information or stay in touch with these episodes to come, please check out our website at growthplatform.co/podcast. In general, if you'd like to be in touch with us personally, feel free to contact us at team@growthplatform.co. Thanks again for listening. Take care.